Boom. And we're live. Mike, thanks for joining me, man.
Absolutely, John.
You look like you're coming from a very nice environment right now. Where are you at?
It's basically my mother and my aunt's house. Used to be my grandmother's. It's a spot on the Jersey Shore. We
Lovely.
did dinner in the shade of the house today.
You guys getting some good weather finally?
Yeah, we got some warm weather, some nice breeze. It's been some good days down here.
Awesome. Um, so, man, tell me before we get started on, we were chatting a bit on Twitter. There is something specific that you wanted to like talk about and share tonight, but tell me a little bit about your journey down the Bitcoin rabbit hole before we get going on everything.
I mean, for me, how my journey down the Bitcoin rabbit hole is I first became aware of Bitcoin. I'd want to say the first time I can recall was 2013. And frankly, it was just the Silk Road aspect, which I never really got the guts to utilize any aspect of the Silk Road. But I was intrigued how that was a method that people could, exchange goods, pay, so forth. But I never really stopped to think about the monetary mechanism of Bitcoin. I just took it for granted that Bitcoin was how you paid, Bitcoin is what you used.
Totally. Yeah.
Always assumed it was something trivial like a photo attachment on an email, which is also significant, but it didn't really raise my eyebrows and I didn't ask the questions. So fast forward, come 2017, I started to kind of look at it in my periphery over the course of 2017. And it wasn't until the blow off top of December 2017 where I was like, wow, I must have really missed something. Like, what is this? What's going on here? So I kind of got in like 2 days before the blow off top and then started learning about what I actually bought. Like I had no idea what I even really bought when I first bought. And I'd say it took me until like 6 weeks deep to have a Trezor, transfer to a device, have a wallet like Samurai. And I'm still not as advanced of a user as I'd like to be. I find I'm not that advanced on the technical spectrum. For example, I purchased my parts to do a Raspblitz node, and those parts are still sitting in a bag. I haven't made a move. It's really kind of pathetic.
Yeah.
But I'm very intrigued by it all. I went to Magical Crypto Conference last year, and it was very interesting to hear various blockstream people talk and to meet real Bitcoiners. And I suppose what I'd liken it to is first you see the number go up aspect of Bitcoin, but then you realize there's so much more about it. When I started to listen to Andreas Antonopoulos videos and realize that there's properties and qualities imparted by Bitcoin that have pretty profound effects on human groups and society. And that's when I started going deeper down the rabbit hole, kind of getting excited, kind of getting impressed by it. And I've basically dedicated, I'll say, somewhere between 10 and 20 hours a week to reading and consuming content. I'm very excited by it. And I think there's a lot of potential in the space.
100%. It's funny you mentioned the Silk Road experience, and I think a huge portion of us have something along the lines of a similar story. But I often tell the story about how I was so enthralled about Bitcoin from a like political tool component, and not number go up, that I totally blanked on number go up simultaneously, which is beyond me how that could have happened, but here we are. But even prior to that, same as you, I was intrigued by the Silk Road. As the story goes, a buddy of mine wanted to source some DMT, and he was like, "Oh, we can get some DMT on the Silk Road,"
right.
And we pussied out. But still, we went far enough to understand what was involved. And this is where I came in touch with Bitcoin. It's like, oh, you've got to pick up some of these Bitcoin to transact on this website, and it was more of a nuisance. Like, I got it right. Like, okay, they want to transact in this like non-traceable or presumably non-traceable private currency. And it didn't dawn on me like, well, what attributes does it need to have to fulfill that purpose? Because I would have been very intrigued by it had it been like obviously stated, or had I pursued it a little bit further.
Yeah.
But at the time I was just like, oh, it was kind of like a game token. It's like, oh, you need to pick up these so that you can buy something in this marketplace. And,
Right.
at that point in time, that was as far as it went. But yeah, I think a lot of people probably heard about the Silk Road and or either interacted with it or nearly interacted with it, and that was probably their first exposure to Bitcoin.
It is so multidisciplinary, though. That's the
Right.
thing. It's bigger than any one philosophy that one has in their wheelhouse. Like, it's so broad, Bitcoin, broader than you'd assume when you first enter.
100%. Yeah, and that's what's so intriguing about it, because you mentioned you spend 20 hours a week or so on it. You can do that, because there's so many different, elements involved in understanding it in as holistic a way as you can. And as you go further down the rabbit hole, you kind of come to the realization that one, it goes really deep and touches on some really core, ideas about humanity,
Mhm.
life, energy, that kind of stuff. But there's no shortage of intellectual fodder for you to go in any direction,
Right.
and keep stimulating yourself with that, because being money and the other things that it probably is and will be, it touches on everything. It impacts
Yeah.
so many things, and that's what makes it so juicy to keep learning about it.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
So tell me about if you're comfortable, tell me about your profession and kind of what you've been trying to do with your colleagues and
I've,
stuff like
I've
that.
did a few things. I mean, I'll say that I've started out life. I was a glass blower for 8 years.
Cool.
That wasn't meeting my financial needs. Specifically, I wanted to be able to afford a boat, and it seemed like the shortest distance between 2 points seemed to go to nursing school. So I went to nursing school, went back to school after having a fine arts background in 2007, came out of school in the end of 2010. So then I was basically a registered nurse. I got hired on in a community hospital where I worked on a dialysis floor. I basically stayed in that facility for a total of 8 years. The first 5 years were on that dialysis slash med surge floor. So it was like hemodialysis patients, peritoneal dialysis patients, plus whatever else. And then at the end, I went into what they call their float pool, which means on a nightly basis, I was assigned to one of 5 units, and I could be pulled mid shift to different environments. So it was a lot more variable. And I, got to work on like the chemo floor and the infectious disease floor and the ortho floor. So I've seen a little bit of a lot. And I'll be honest with you, nursing's a very high pressure job with a broad skills basket. I mean, you need to have a little bit of the analytical, you need to have a little bit of the human, you need to have like this chop, chop, get it done. And a lot of what I would like to be doesn't necessarily fit with what floor nursing is. So I've basically transitioned away from the floor. I feel like I worked excessively during some of the time I worked on the floor, and presently, I did a little bit of travel nursing last year on a ortho unit, but I'm primarily working under my small captain's license now. I drive an oil boom boat, and so that's how I feed myself right now, but I still hold the nurse's license.
Cool.
So I guess how we lead down that rabbit hole is my thought is given that I don't have a strong technical background and I'd like to do something for Bitcoin, I feel that trying to make inroads about talking to people about Bitcoin within the group of their profession might possibly help build small sub communities. So I basically have just made a little reblogging group on Facebook, which is a real humble beginning, but like I just basically try to invite different nurses I know in to just look at content, and I try to just put stuff in front of people, and maybe I'll make a couple Bitcoiners here and there. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Right. And how's it been going?
I mean, engagement is extremely low. It's hard to get people to even want to open their eyes to Bitcoin. Like it's how do you get them to take that first step is the real struggle I have. I only have 71 people in it. I'm pretty selective, and I don't grind hard to get the numbers up. That might be a shortcoming of mine. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's just something I'm feeling out. So I
So
guess I'm open to thoughts and suggestions and ideas. That's kind of where I'm at.
so let me just to reiterate. So you started a Facebook group with colleagues in the nursing domain, right?
Yeah, loosely colleagues. Like basically, I targeted travel nurses throughout a travel nursing site, and just by interjecting in threads here and there where appropriate, and a few people would join. So based on those casual efforts to bring people in the group, I've got about 71 people that look on the content. It's real small.
And they showed up because they had some interest, presumably, right?
They must have. If I put the link in front of them and they chose to join, I feel like they at least had a very minor curiosity.
And this is on Facebook. So, because
Yeah,
I one of the things I find with it's interesting to see the different types of engagement on different platforms. You know,
mhm.
Twitter is obviously, well, for me, it's the best. It's the most kind of intellectual discourse. You know, Facebook, you get a lot of reactionary kind of mainstream
Right.
responses. YouTube is just the comments and shit are just a cesspool of nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, so it's different on every one. But what has been your experience in terms of their feedback? So those 71 members, you know,
Um,
what have they been
ex-
saying about everything?
eh, Extremely poor engagement, if I'm to be completely honest. I mean,
Right.
that's occasionally I'll get a few likes and so forth. I feel like it's hard to find people that are willing to put in the mental energy, because to get into Bitcoin, you got to have a little bit of mental plasticity to kind of try it on for size and challenge your existing ideas. And it's not an easy process for a lot of people, I feel.
For sure.
I, 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 I have some aspirations to try to broaden my focus in the sense that I want to go off Facebook, my own website, and I kind of the concept is dot 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 discussing Bitcoin. And basically what it would allow is, let's say you were a welder, you could drop to the pull down, create a login under the welder community, and now you're talking about Bitcoin with welders. And we might be early to divide the community into professional subgroups for discussion, but I feel like within professional subgroups, it's easy to build camaraderie. In other words, if you already have the familiarity of, say, being a mechanic and you're in that room with other mechanics, maybe it's that much easier to talk about Bitcoin together because you might have a side conversation about some other thing.
100%.
It's just kind of something I'm just experimenting with. I don't have any really large goals to even build a monetary structure to it or anything at this point.
Yeah.
Like, the vision ultimately is like I'm having a meeting with an old colleague who's currently an administrator in a Florida hospital, and basically the value proposition I feel that could exist for, say, somebody who is on the more Bitcoin knowledgeable level compared to a layperson is being basically like a good shepherd of resources, that you can almost be like a Bitcoin help desk, in the sense that you say to this employer that says, hey, would you like to have employees that save? Would you like to have employees that are financially responsible, that grow and become secure? Well, this is a good tool to do that. And we can help those people be less likely to make mistakes. And it's up to them to come ask the question. And they still, the burden is on them to research and learn like how to use the tools suggested. Like, I can't make choices for people, but normal people don't have knowledge about like not taking screenshots of, say, bit39 keywords on a wallet, or like a variety of things. So in other words, there's a lot of teaching required to get into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And I almost want to be, that's my best bet, I feel, is to try to teach Bitcoin at some point. I don't know.
It sounds like almost like it's a B2B product, like you're like a corporate Bitcoin trainer and you kind of, you know, like the kind of corporate health model where you pitch the company about, you know, the benefits of employee health and, you know, reducing missed days and productivity and all that stuff. And then they subsidize in some way like education or services for the employees.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Here's what the shape of my life is presently. So my overall personal goal is I want to be able to become location independent, given that I've dedicated the bulk of my resources towards a boat I keep in New Orleans. And there's bigger and there's faster and prettier. It's a West Sail 32 if anyone wants to look them up. But like, I want to start traveling on my small sailboat ultimately.
Nice.
So my current life working on the water, I have a lot of downtime. I've got 4 days off a week, and my time at work is largely about 85 to 90% downtime waiting for the task to happen that I do. So if there was some aspect of my life that required me to talk to someone on the phone for 15 minutes or shoot back a message or share a link, I can do that kind of thing. So I'm trying to determine, how can I produce value to individuals in Bitcoin, not even so much in a monetary way. How can I be useful? How can I make something? How can I do something from remote with my current skill set, with the time I have on my hands? That's kind of what I'm asking myself.
Gotcha. And are you this Facebook group with the 71 people? What kind of content are you sharing with them? Like, do you like on a regular clip? Do you share a certain type of content? Do you foster discussion? Like, how are you educating that
Okay,
group of
so
people?
if I were to think about what content I share, I tend to share like 2 to 3 things a week. Um, I try to share good foundational things that produce understanding. Like somewhere in that mix is that 3 brown 1 blue explanation of blockchain that pretty cleanly breaks it down in a half an hour, like that one. And there's, I want to say the individual might have been speaking to Senate or the Canadian Parliament, uh, not Andreas, but another gentleman, and he was in 2 minutes explained what Bitcoin offers versus legacy systems. I try to share things that, in a very concise way, help people understand what Bitcoin is, what it does. Like I share that, like, the halving chart that shows you every halving, every epoch from like now to like the end, and it shows you how diminishingly small the reward gets. I try
Hmm.
to help people understand scarcity. I try to help people understand best practices. Like I share some Jameson Lopp content, like about key management and so forth. So I try to have a blend of like Bitcoin epiphany, early epiphany stuff where you're realizing what Bitcoin is. I try to have some content that talks about good things to do and how to prevent problems. Like I've recently began working. I don't know if you're familiar with eFani, that cellular provider. Have you ever heard of a SEEB within the space? Well, what it is a California-based company that offers SIM cards that are basically 3-day locked. And I couldn't tell you what the 11 client-side security features are, but it's a very private and secure way to prevent yourself from likely being SIM swapped.
Right.
I've chosen to use his service, and I think it's a good idea for people to look into and do their own research, things like that. Like I think there's a lot of good things out there we could do. Like I probably have shared something about running a node, even though I haven't successfully run my node. Like, like I just I almost look at it as my own personal development blog too, in the sense that when I see something that like broadens me or improves me, like I share some I just shared a real old Tales from the Crypt episode where Bitcoin Tina was on back in like January of 19 or something. And it's a total frothing conversation between Marty and him for like 3 hours. And just, yeah, it's just kind of a real casual thing. It's almost like having my own MySpace page, to be honest with you. Like, this is not like enterprise grade or anything. Like,
You're just like, this is cool. This is interesting. This is cool. Check this out. Check that
I
out.
hope to grow into something that can be developable, in the sense that, like, say if I was a coder, generally if you are somebody that codes or builds, you want to have a good project page so somebody can look at what you do and they say, oh wow, look at what you did, you're doing things. And while I'm not on the technical front, I try to be on the human front, and I try to align with the things that matter within Bitcoin. And I hope to, in time, be part of Bitcoin. Like, I don't know. Sometimes I think about, like, since I have a small captain's license, I have a couple sailboats. In time, I think about the potential for sailing charters. I also think about the potential for graphical advertisement on sales. Like, you can deliver impressions in a very cost effective way in some areas. Like say if you were to go down New York's East River with a graphic spinnaker displaying like an exchange's name on it,
Right.
like a lot of people are going to see that spinnaker. You'd sooner do it on the Hudson than the East River, but you get the idea.
Yeah, sure. So when you have these conversations, whether they're like Facebook chat conversations around some piece of content you shared, or presumably, some that you've had in your personal life, what is the aspect that like you and the two-part question, what's the aspect that you enjoy most? Like what gets you most amped up when you talk about Bitcoin? And
Mhm.
what's the part that people are most receptive to when you talk about Bitcoin? And because I'm interested in knowing if it's one and the same, because what I find is, I get enthusiastic pretty easily. And when usually, and I kind of usually say that enthusiasm is infectious. Now, the flip side is that people can think you're a bit of a nut bar if you go over the top with it. But
Right.
what gets you most amped up when you're talking about it to like a noob?
I'll answer both of those, but I just first want to mention that I feel like sometimes I'm guilty of trying to make them drink from the fire hose.
Right,
Like
right.
in other words, like when you crack into that Bitcoin subject, boom, it just comes pouring forward because we've had a big head start.
Yeah, for sure.
I suppose when I'm trying to communicate to a noob about Bitcoin, I first really try to stay away from the how. I feel like the technical details under the hood, while they are important and they are fundamental for what this is and what this does, I don't think it's the first thing you need to grasp to know why it matters. I feel like the permissionless aspects, the freedom, the censorship resistant, like those qualities that affect how it can be used and so forth, I feel are more important to understand to develop an appetite for wanting to hear about it.
Sure.
Um, I suppose I really like talking about the scarcity aspect, and I'm pretty big into the monetary history. And I feel like I want to say it was Heavily Armed Clown put together the WTF happened in 1971 website,
He and
and
Ben, yeah.
really hits the nail on the head and drives it home how this default Keynesian world we're living in has done so much to shape the way we behave. It's shaped so much, and I don't think it's good for us. Um, I've
Does that land with people? Like when you talk about coming off the gold standard in 71 and all the kind of deleterious social effects that have happened as a result?
I don't think it does. I mean, I don't know that they can envision living like without debt. And yeah, like in other words, I feel like as a Bitcoiner, eventually I feel like the best kind of Bitcoiner develops into a debt-free kind of person that still chooses to hold more Bitcoin as one of the methods they store value. And a lot of people can't see life without debt. And the problem with choosing to live without debt is you sometimes have to do without or simplify. Like I've at some points I've chosen not to buy things at a moment. I've chosen to buy less expensive things or choose simpler solutions or even buy used. Like I've also experienced, like, due to my decision to work on the water versus like being a workaholic nurse, I've experienced, I'll call it like a 60% downturn in income compared to when I was like, working a ton on a night shift nursing.
Mhm.
And that's a whole adjustment too. And it's really surprising to me to look at how my life is now. Whereas when I was making a bunch of money, I was in no way happier than like what my existence is now. I have like 4 days off a week. I, I don't have as materially flush of a life as I did, but like it's still a very good existence. I eat what I want, I go where I want. I've got a Jeep, I got a car, I've got a few boats. Like, and don't get me wrong, I am an eccentric person and I make uh unusual life choices to be able to have a few boats and a Jeep and nonsense like that. In other words, I'm not somebody living in a luxury apartment for $1,300 a month or $1,500 a month. In other words, I live with some friends. My overhead's low, and I know that probably hits on some sort of stereotypical Bitcoiner meme, but like I feel like having low income, low overhead gets me my freedom.
Yeah.
Like I
Time preference, man. I mean, you make sacrifices now to reap the rewards in the future.
and
Or even to shift the rewards now, as you say. I mean, you share a home so you can have freedom on the water more often. I
I
mean,
have multiple boats, man. Like I've had a Boston Whaler, I've got a Trojan 10 meter, I have a Bristol 27, I've got a Westsail 32, like got a Starcraft, I've got a Grumman canoe. Like in
all
other
right,
words,
all right. Why don't you settle
no,
down?
but
Settle
all
down.
I'm trying to say is I love boats, man. If anybody ever needs to sail, I've got you covered. Like if you're passing through New Jersey, I will take anyone sailing.
Dope.
I'm
That's awesome.
passionate about it. That's actually one of my goals as well, is to develop community sailing coastally, particularly in New Jersey. I'm not that close to it, but I've got some ideas and some gears turning.
But so you got this passion with sailing, obviously, and being on the water. Like, do you think it's are you- like are, just to clarify, are you just kind of like doing your part for Bitcoin, or you actually want like this kind of educational thing to morph into, as you were saying before, kind of like non-geographically defined income. Is that what the goal is?
It would be good if it happened, but it doesn't need to happen. I mean,
Right. You just enjoy, you still, even without it, you would just enjoy having these conversations, creating
oh
these groups and
yeah,
stuff.
absolutely. Like in other words, like I'm already fed. Like in other words, the things I do with Bitcoin, it's if I ever did evolve into something where like I was hanging my shingle in some way with Bitcoin, like that would be fantastic. And I have a few ideas of what I could try to do, but like it's really not the priority. Specifically in terms of earnings, I'm I love growing in different directions. I'm in the process of studying to get my Class B CDL to drive dump truck locally here in Jersey. There's a lot of gravel quarries here in Lacey, New Jersey. So basically, since I've got 4 days off a week, I figure if
Yeah.
I drive a little bit of dump truck, I do some boat work. Also, probably branching out into some towing work over on the Raritan Bay this summer. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, see how it comes together. I'm trying to enjoy my professional existence more so than just uh, sacrifice my own wishes and wants just for money. Like, and that's paid dividends for me. Like, in other words, I was supposed to become like an art teacher first time around coming out of school fine arts degree. I threw away the education part and I became a studio glass worker. And I didn't have as much security and I didn't have as much money, but like it was awesome. I got to listen to music, casual life. I was making goblets and lighting installations and table lamps and nonsense.
That sounds cool as shit.
It was awesome. I dug it. If anybody ever wants to blow glass, one of the best places you could go do it and experience it is Jordana Corson's studio in Marlborough, New Hampshire, a half hour outside of Keene. She's fantastic. She was my professor in college, and I worked for a number of other artists as well. But like, she's an awesome woman. If you're ever in New Hampshire, go blow glass.
That's awesome. So what about like the colleagues on the boats? Do you try to have these conversations with them? Are they less receptive?
But there's only one coworker who has the mind for it. I work in a pretty simple role driving the oil boom boat, and if I was to stereotype, I've got a coworker that likes sports. I got a young guy that just chases girls and whatever. I've got an older gentleman that's just busy being a grandfather, enjoying that life, and
Pretty set in their ways, I
but the
guess.
intellectual's the one. Like there's this one guy that he used to be an animator earlier in life, and then I think he did some work with the Postal Service, and he's got some geology degree, and he's a real thinker. He reads, he messes around with Python. Like I talked to him about Bitcoin a little bit. He hasn't like swallowed the hook or really developed his own independent line of study, but he will lob the ball back and forth and talk about things regarding Bitcoin and how it fits into the world. Yeah, I haven't really done so great with finding people that really want to gravitate to it. Like my friends that I am close with, like so at the lake house where I'm living with some friends, they're all into their Robin Hood and their stocks and all this nonsense, and I can't even understand how you could look at what's going on right now and be remotely comfortable. Like, in other words, like this is not going to end well. I have to believe. I don't know, man.
Are they rubbing it in your face right now, though? They're like, "Oh, my stock went up 3x."
I don't think as Bitcoiners, I don't think we're doing that bad right now. Like, in other words,
No.
when I look at how it's been, I feel quite all right, and I feel like Bitcoin is kind of almost like a calling beyond the number. Like, yes, I care about my financial security and my well-being and such, but like, you don't just dedicate yourself to Bitcoin just because of the number. Like, maybe
Right.
at first you do, but generally speaking, the people that kind of put some skin in the game and get some grit and go pretty deep, it's because you start to care about it and it means something to you and so forth. Like, I don't know. I like this a lot.
Oh, I'm 100% with you. I mean, Bitcoin, I often say, and I hear a lot of other people say it as well, like Bitcoin is the social movement, protest movement, political movement of our time.
Sure.
It just so happens that you may also, secure your financial future with it if you play your cards right. But, um, I agree. It's about the revolution. The pump is, a nice thing to go with it.
If I could just say one thing why it's on my mind, I really think it's great that you're just talking to regular people in the Bitcoin community. I find that it's so interesting to hear. Like, I really enjoyed hearing from Surfer Jim the other day, and I followed him on Twitter, and I see him talk about some of the things he talks about, and it's just like very interesting to see the different regular people that this is made out of. You know what I mean? Like
100%.
people like Stony Bison, people like all these people out there. That's the important thing for people to realize. In other words, like, Bitcoiners are just people. It could be anybody. You know, my friend, I only have one real life Bitcoin friend. He's a guy I went to high school with, and he like grooms dogs. Like, that's his thing right now. And, you know, he's like into the same stuff as Joe Rogan and so forth. You touched upon it before. He's into Bitcoin, but generally speaking, Bitcoiners are hard to find.
Yeah, man. It seems like we're all just these like sleeper cell monetary revolutionists that are just, biding our time, stacking our sats, and just,
Right.
waiting for the right moment.
Isn't it funny how late everybody feels when you first arrive? Like, I thought,
Oh, yeah.
like I was like the latest guy on earth when I showed up in December 2017. I was like, oh my God, I ruined it. It'll never. Now I feel early. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's so goddamn early. Once you really start to learn about it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I find myself being impatient sometimes because, you see the potential of it and you want to bring it forward as fast as possible. Of course you do. But
Sure.
objectively speaking, like when you really start to see what's going on, it is so early. It's,
When did you come in about? Like, where in the Bitcoin years did you enter?
um I can't remember if it was 14 or 15. It was on a trip. I was in Bali, and I had been like, by that point I was thoroughly interested, saw all the Andreas videos and
Right.
um, all that kind of stuff, and just had never taken the time to figure it out. And then I actually went to a co-working space there, and they
Okay.
just finished a Bitcoin talk, and I was like, God damn, I missed it. But I met this girl, and she was like, come back tomorrow and we'll have dinner. I was with my girlfriend, and she was like, we'll have dinner with my boyfriend and you and your girlfriend, and we'll talk about Bitcoin, and we'll get you set up. And I was like, yes. And then I emailed her to like set up the time the next day, and she just went totally cold. I went to the co-working place, nothing. So
Oh,
she just spoofed. But on the corner of like a main kind of tourist drag there was like a retail Bitcoin place that its whole thing was just helping people like get set up with Bitcoin. So I went in, and my girlfriend and I set up a wallet, bought some Bitcoin. We were there for like an hour. It took for ages. I don't know what was so involved with the process, because it was, at the time, it was just a blockchain.info wallet, right? And
yeah.
you pay some money, you get some Bitcoin in return. So that was when I got in and started taking it more seriously. But I with each passing day, I am more convicted, and my stacking reflects that, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
What was I going to ask you? Something about what you were just saying. What were we talking about? You were talking about when you got in. Oh, how early we are. The thing that always gets me too is you were saying about how we're all just normal people, and we're living our lives, and we see this thing, and it's really compelling to us, and we want to see the impact that it's going to have. It all, like, when you're in it, you can feel as though you're waiting for something. But as these conversations kind of indicate, and the fact that everyone's just normal people doing their thing, we are the happening. And every
Yeah.
day a couple more normal people come in, and they start asking those questions, and they start going down that rabbit hole, and then they become the people that are waiting for other people. And we're all just like, it's slowly happening, I guess, beneath our feet, and we're waiting for some big moment where maybe there's some recognition, or the price action, or the failure of this or that. But really, it's all just happening right now through all of us normal people all over the
Absolutely.
world, looking out and saying, man, shit does not add up. And then this thing over here, like, makes so much sense. And the synthesis of those two things just compels you to be involved.
There's a young kid I know on the internet that lives in Oklahoma that just DM'd me a couple weeks ago that he just got his first $20 of Bitcoin, and he's a young guy cutting his teeth in the world, finding his way. Nice kid, you know what I mean? I don't know where I found him or what the story is, but he's a good kid. and it's just nice to see him moving down that path. It was just really cool to see
Why
that.
did
I felt like the content I shared in life influenced him to sort of go down the rabbit hole.
Awesome. Yeah, well, that's another thing, man. And like when you consider people like Andreas, who have influenced so many people, even though I find myself disagreeing with some of like Andreas's political views these days, and maybe I'm just being a dick because anybody can think whatever they want, right? And the important part is the kind of value he's brought to the space. But it's just amazing to think of how many minds he's set down that trail of
Yeah,
learning about this stuff, and the real world impact that all those people who he kind of orange pilled is going to have.
yeah, it's huge. On that same note of people in the community and who we look up to and so forth, I feel almost that it's important that we sometimes forgive our heroes in this field. I know a lot of people are upset with some of the things that went on with that Mimble Wimble coin with Trace and so forth. That was a big downfall and so forth. And I don't think we can celebrate the things we wouldn't like to see in the community, but people stumble. And I just feel like he should come back if he still likes
Dude,
it.
dude, I totally agree with you. But the thing is if you stumble, you got to own up to it. You got to come and face
Right,
face the
right.
music. You got to come and say, and let's assume you did make an actual mistake and there was no like confusion or
Misunderstanding or so forth.
misunderstanding. You come and say, I fucked up, like I was
Right.
greedy, I wanted it too much, or whatever. Or if it's some other thing where it's like, a different, difference of opinion or something, that's why we're
Right.
all here. I'm not here to say I hate you for having a different point of view.
Right. Right.
I'm saying, come and talk to me about our differing points of view. Maybe you're right, maybe I'm right, maybe we come to a new understanding altogether. But let's have the conversation. What's the point of just holding these and not testing them? So if you do fuck up, like it's fine. Like you said, we're all human, but you got to come and face the music and own up to it.
Oh, agreed. I just, it's such a charged community. It's intense. And it's also, I'll be honest with you, it's a difficult thing. Like everybody enters new to Bitcoin to find that path to become kind of like really focused on Bitcoin and to understand that like it's not here because credit cards were too slow or whatever dumb reason sometimes people think Bitcoin matters. Like it's hard to get to that place. In other words, there's a lot of pitfalls where you could go astray.
Yeah. And as you say, I mean, I tend now that I tend to think the toxicity is ultimately a virtue, but it's obvious, it's very easy to understand why for people first entering the space, it can be a massive turnoff, right? Because they
Sure.
see the kind of aggressive attitude that people have, and people just think, oh, what a bunch of assholes. I don't want to be involved in something like this. But if your own curiosity and pursuit of knowledge and truth is strong enough to get past such a surface level kind of facade, then you get past it and you wind up realizing not only what Bitcoin is because you persist and you continue to learn about it, but you also come to realize that like beyond after you get past the toxicity, at least this has been my experience, and I shouldn't generalize it, but the vast majority of people that I connect with in this space are like really great people. They want what's good for, of course, themselves and their family, but also the world. I mean, that's why a lot of them are so passionate about Bitcoin, because they know, how beneficial it will be for all people in the world, and they want that for people. And even like I'll attack someone's idea, and because I want to throw down with the idea, I want to smash those two ideas together, and I want to be proven wrong, or I want to prove you wrong, or I want to refine my understanding in some way. That's the whole point. But that doesn't mean I
Yeah.
got to attack the person. I don't hate that person because their idea sucks. But so let me attack the idea in its full kind of ferocity, and the person is something totally separate.
That's very important to realize that it's not an attack on the person, it's a discussion, like, and some people can't separate the two, I suppose.
That's true. That's true. And they're that's a shame, and that's a commentary on the broader
Yeah.
social discourse that's happening today, and it's something
It's
that
a thin skin age.
yeah, and everything is based off emotion. Like logic and reason, and truth, and as accurate of as possible data just doesn't seem to be that important of a factor. It's just about how like emotional a reaction can be generated from something, and that is what people go off of. And you know, I've been saying this a bunch lately because I'm so dismayed by it. Because if you don't base these discussions or broader societal questions around logic, reason, truth, as accurate data as possible, then you're doomed. If you're just basing off emotion and impulse, you come
Yeah.
to nothing. You come to nothing but destruction.
Hmm.
You
I
know,
agree.
and we're seeing a lot of manifestations of that today. Man, one of the things I was thinking about with the and I know this is super cliche. I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
podcasts and stuff out there now, and it can be kind of hard to cut through the noise. But like, I'm genuinely interested in, and I'm sure I'll even start doing it myself. But I think there's tremendous value in um, having all perspectives and methods of communication being represented. And because, you know, so many of us communicate in different styles and have different perspectives, I think this opens the door for everyone to do this. But like, I'd love to hear, you know, you mentioned the conversation with your the colleague on the boats,
Yes.
right? The intellectual one. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd love to hear a recorded conversation of you and him jamming on Bitcoin. Like, I do that often. Like when I'm in real life, I'll just put the recorder on my phone and put it on the table, and I'll just chat with people. Like, that would be a cool piece of
That's
content
neat.
to put out and say, like, this is a discussion we had. Or if
I
it's with
think
a total noob.
I think the broad cross section you're sampling is really interesting, and I hope what comes of it is people can see a little piece of themselves in all these different people that you speak with. I think it's really cool that you're speaking to people that are just regular people within the Bitcoin space. You know what I mean? I'm no different than any other Bitcoiner really. I'm only at the level of having a couple hardware wallets, software wallet. You know what I mean? I'm no big deal. Like in other words,
Forefront of the revolution, man. What are you talking about?
I know, but in other words, you have people,
I know what you mean.
you have like your people that are contributing to projects and have run like every flavor of software and can comment on the nuances between them. Like I got a huge respect for like the real like protocol level scholars within our space that not only get like the things we were talking about, but they get the nuts and bolts of this stuff. And it's really good that we have them almost to just be like almost like diplomats between the tech stack and us, because I don't speak the tech stack. But when you hear someone you can trust who's knowledgeable about it break it down into pieces, we can just basically take their takeaway and run with it.
Totally. And I really appreciate those people and their work as well. You know, but the reality is, talk about like your normal person, they're speaking an alien language to a normal person. I mean, you and I probably have difficulty keeping up even as much, you know, research and
Yeah.
attempts that we make. So I just think there's room for so many approaches to all of this. Like we said, I mean, the reason why the rabbit hole is so stimulating is because it touches on so many different things. And so you can, the doorways are infinite to this. And I think I would love to hear these conversations go down with like a Bitcoin
I want to share a
enthusiast.
quick thought.
Sure.
I have a friend who's a no coiner. He lives in Vermont, and he's I think does some work with art, maybe paintings. I'm not certain. And he messaged me the other day, and he's trying to figure out something he can do with Bitcoin to do with his art, and he barely knows what he's trying to do. And it was unfortunate. He shared with me some like shit coin that is saying it's going to do something with art, and like I automatically had huge concerns about like, well, what network is this operating on? What is it promising to do? In other words, like it's way too much web page and team headshots, and like you just almost know that it's not going to become the dominant force in like modern painting. Like I can't promise you it won't be, but like the odds are against it. Like in other
Right.
words, it's just some damn thing happening in Australia, and it's who fucking knows. But
Right.
yeah, it's interesting how there's outsiders that are nibbling on the edges of this space, trying to figure out what to do with it, and they will learn things. It's so undiscovered. It's almost like how there was a time that like Netscape was revolutionary, and then we had a different web browsing experience. Like it, we don't even know what's going to be launched on top of this. In other words, the thing that just goes pop that you're like, wow, how do we live without this? Like, it's still waiting in the wings.
Right.
It's just, the potential's there. The open architecture allows for that, which is the beautiful thing. I love that internet beats intranet any day. Like, the fact that anything can be built on top of Bitcoin. If you could conceptualize it, if you can implement it, it'll run on top of it. And who knows what we're going to build with this thing? I don't know.
Yeah, it's super exciting. And I think because, I think part of the reason, and perhaps this is the case with, this artist person, is like Bitcoin is on the surface, like when you first encounter it, so not sexy. It's way sexier to be like, oh, like, blockchain for monetizing struggling visual artists. Like, oh my God, this is what we needed. We've always been underappreciated. Now we're going to combine this great new tech with our talents, and it's going to be fucking amazing. And this, like, we're going to reap all the awards. And
Ethereum. Yeah, I get you.
Right. And whereas Bitcoin just like over there in the corner, like, yeah, bro, I'm just like revolutionary sound money. That's it.
That's exactly
whatever.
Yeah.
And people aren't that excited about that on the surface, and which is a shame, because I think it leads a lot of people down roads that ultimately probably leave them worse off than when they started. But I think you're right, man. We can't imagine yet what's going to be built on layers above the base layer, and all the different wonderful things that it's going to be able to do. So for now, until we can just like point and say, hey, or check this out and show people, we've got to have these kind of, we've got to try to speak to people where they're at on the things that are relevant to them. And that can be difficult, right? Because with something that's so varied, and it's, it impacts so many things, you got to be a fairly skilled communicator to know where to start with somebody, because like I've gone into conversations, and it's like, do you start with the history of money to somebody who doesn't even know, who's never even questioned why their national currency is just a piece of paper?
You only have a minute with somebody, like,
right.
And once you go too steep on that learning curve, you fly too close to the sun and they crash to the ground. Like, it's so tricky to find that sweet spot. Like, sometimes I feel like you just got to give somebody a breadcrumb and then pull back.
Yeah.
Like, you can't drown these people. Like, the whole drinking from the fire hose thing, that's, I think, the number one thing we have to be careful of.
Yeah. But I think ultimately, and you said this a bit earlier, but like, I think NGU Tech is going to bring in most people.
Well, when you say NGU Tech, I'm sorry.
So NGU is number go up. It's kind of a meme floating around now.
Okay.
Because everybody's greedy, and the beautiful thing about this thing is it hijacks people's greed, and once they're.
I'm not going to lie, that's what opened my eyes personally. In other words, it hit me with the realization that I was like, holy crap! If I acted in 2013 when this first crossed my plate, my life would be different. That's what I was hit with, that realization. I felt like I missed the biggest opportunity in my life.
Yeah, and everybody wants to upgrade their life, right? Everyone wants more freedom to do the things that they want to do. And so I think, and that's a tricky one, because, you just run around telling people that, this is the greatest investment ever, and then it waxes and wanes, and, so that's a bit of a sensitive thing.
I never preached to number go up. I personally don't feel if you have to want Bitcoin, if you don't have that knowledge of it, that belief in it, that connection to it, you will not possibly weather the volatility nor the gains. You'll think you won and you'll exit early, or you won't be able to hang and you'll leave because you lost blank.
But what was your experience? Because you bought the top in 2017, right, or thereabouts?
I'm a bit of an odd case, in my opinion, in the sense that I'm not all that risk averse, and pretty much my situation, I looked at it was, well, it walked away on me once. I'm not going to let it walk away on me twice. I'm going to be part of this. I'm going to learn about it, and I'm going to do it.
Right.
And it's either going to happen or it's not. But I won't ever have say like, wow, I watched it walk away from me, and then I did nothing the second time, and look, I screwed up twice. Like, in other words, we're either going to succeed at this someday, and that'll be great for me and you and anybody else that chooses to be involved, or I'll know I tried and I value this for reasons beyond strictly the number. Like, in other words, yes, the number matters, but I'm hoping that I am bitter as hell about, like, I look at things like Wells Fargo 2008. Like, my brother was a young family man, that kind of thing, single income earner, mechanic, and they gave him way more mortgage than he needed, and it's predatory. Like, in other words, it was two separate mortgages, and the one on top had awful terms, and like, they screw the hell out of so many people. Like, credit is not a product. Like, most products, like, if I make a good or product, like, you'd like to believe that, like, yeah, I use this brand Ratchet because it's the best one and it's corrosion resistant and it meets my needs. Like, all right, good, happy customer, glad you're with us. Like, whereas these financial products are not something you'd wish upon your children or mother or yourself. Like, and that's where it goes off the rails for me, is you can't recommend what they sell in good faith, really. It's like their product is poison, and it hurts real people, and you, like, look all over, and there's a lot of people banged up because of the way credit is offered, the way mortgages are structured, the way our society is built, and I don't like it. I don't like what it does to people, and that's a big part of why I feel I'm involved too. Like, it's kind of in the back of my mind. I don't think about it all the time, but I am pissed as hell about what banks do, what they aim to do. They will know, they'll stop at nothing. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
disgusting.
Well, I think that's really well put, man. And I do think about it all the time. Like when we talk about what you just said is like, I'm when I really saw what was going on here, you ask yourself the question, because you said, like, of course it can go to zero. Of course this thing can fail, right?
Sure.
Um, but even if it did, would you be able to live with, like, look back on your life and live with yourself, knowing
Yeah.
that the opportunity was there and you didn't fully engage in it to try to, even if just like a tiny bit, increase its chances of success?
I feel like failure is so unlikely just because this whole movement is made out of hard-headed, dedicated, crazy people. Where, in other words, like, I wrote it from, like, my first buy was at like 17,350, and I
Yeah.
wrote that down to, I have to confess, like, I had an abrupt situation. I did sell at 6,000 in September of 18, and I rebought in December of 18, and I continued to buy through 19 and 20. But, like, life demanded it of me. I needed those funds to clear out something else, and that's just what
Sure.
I do. But bottom line is, I ride this all over, and I don't even care at this point. Like,
Yeah.
so, but I'm not going to lie and say, oh, I never sold the SAT, because I did. My
Yeah.
life
No.
demanded that I needed those funds, and I couldn't have them locked up in Bitcoin. I needed them for something at that time.
Yeah.
So I did. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Of
And
course, you got to do what's rational, and
yeah,
that
well,
works
I
for
mean,
you.
that's just it. Like, I found myself, that's the funny thing about life, man, is I f- sometimes you find yourself in less than desirable circumstances, but you have this, like, paralysis where you don't make the changes necessary to improve your life. And sometimes if you don't make a decision, life chooses for you. And it was kind of like that for me. And it was just beautiful the way life happened afterwards, in the sense that, like, we'll just say, like, shit hit the fan. Like, about, like, 45 minutes after shit hit the fan, I find a posting on Facebook, an older sailor looking to get a hand moving a boat down the ICW. I talk to the gentleman. I visit. I meet him. I agree to help him move his 140 from Solomon Island, Maryland, down to Daytona Beach, Florida. And it was like a wonderful time to, like, self-reflect, think about where I'm pointed, and so forth. And that's when I started moving closer to the water in terms of, like, how I feed myself, how I exist, so forth. I do a little bit of recreational boat sales. I do the working on the water. You know what I mean? So, in other words, like, sometimes, like, when things aren't going well, sometimes it's just as well to just let it go to shit, let it fall apart, and build it back the way you'd like it. Don't stay in your crummy situation just because you feel like you can't. Because I'll tell you what, the fact that I was making really good money made me feel trapped. Like, I was like, I can't quit this. I'm making this or that. Like, you know what I mean? I was getting tons of hours. It was the best I've ever done, dollars and cents, but I was the most unhappy I've ever been as a person. And it impacted me negatively, and it was horrible, bro.
Dude,
Not to brush up against that, but like, and that's kind of a little bit what it does to you. Like, for example, the reason I was working so hard is when I bought that boat I have in New Orleans, I couldn't afford it, like, at all. I stuck my neck out pretty far, bought that on a loan, and it's paid off now, and that's great. But like, I was running full tilt for years to get that damn thing paid off.
yeah,
And the way people have their earnings spent 3-4 years in advance or more, they are running at like red line RPMs full time in their life, and people are in a bad way. Like, it's not good for people. You should be like thinking about what you want to earn, taking what you earn, thinking about what you want to do with it. But we're not meant to run like, balls to the wall every minute of our lives. It's taxing, it's stressful, it destroys us. I
100%.
like my life like this way more. Just
Yeah.
living simple.
Dude, I
Life's
feel
good.
it. My last job in Shanghai, I was miserable, making really good money, working a shit ton. Like, I'd go for 28 days, some days without a break.
Wow.
And I was so unhappy that
Right.
once I finally left it, I went to Thailand for a few weeks to blow off some steam. And
Yeah.
by that, I don't mean party. Like,
No, it's cool.
for me, blowing off steam is like doing a bunch of Muay Thai and swimming in rivers and shit, but like just to
Okay.
kind of recharge my batteries.
Got
And,
it.
and then I bought a motorhome and drove around Europe for 3 months and just, talked to people,
Wow.
recorded random conversations with anyone who wanted to sit down for a chat. And a lot of these types of conversations where
Yeah, yeah.
you're talking about your experience of life and how you look out on the world and the situations that sometimes you're in by your own choices. Sometimes you're in via just the inertia or momentum of life and circumstance. And then like actually having that kind of pivotal moment where you're like, you know what? I got like, on the one hand, I got all these pros that like I'm supposed to be, satisfied with, like the money and the this and the that and that.
Right.
And on this side, I'm fucking unhappy as shit. So
Yeah.
I want to like do the things that are going to increase this column here.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly what that is. Maybe I'm going to have to try some things. Maybe I'm going to have to jump off the deep end. And you do it. And as you say, I mean, maybe less income, but a lot more happiness. And what's
Yeah.
interesting about Bitcoin in particular, is that a lot of people in this space, let's say they're working for Bitcoin, are being paid way less than they could be paid in another domain. Now, you could argue that maybe that's a bad strategy and you should just make as much fiat as you can right now, stack sats and whatever. But for those people that are like compelled to contribute to the space in a different way, like I've had private conversations with a lot of people that are pretty much just scraping by,
Yeah.
but because they're spending a lot of their time contributing to this space, and the irony of it is they've never been happier. They're happy to do that. Like they get to wake up and engage in something that they find meaningful.
Yeah. And that detail you're touching upon there, that sort of core drive that's driving this development, that's driving that thing, that's powerful. That's not somebody that's just like,
Getting a
out of
paycheck to do some work or
selflessness
whatever.
trying to pull something and make a move and get out. Like, these are people that are principled and doing it for reasons and so forth. And that's what a lot of people, that's that like special sauce that's in Bitcoin that people can't even quantify and don't even know it's there until you get into it a little bit. Like, you start to see the kind of grit that is involved with the people that do this. And it's the kind of thing where it comes about slowly, but there's numerous Bitcoiners that are grinding their way through what they want to do in Bitcoin. Like, I'm just going to randomly make an example, and I don't even know their situations well, but like, take Crypto Cloaks. They do a great job. They make a good product. I don't know what the road was like for them to decide to be that company, to do that thing, to make those offerings. You know what I mean? And it probably was a process of discovering and improving their craft and building connections. And you look at how it evolves and look at what they've done. But I'd wager it didn't start easy. In other
Yeah.
words, none of it starts easy. Like, even take, like, you got Rodolfo and CoinKite. That probably didn't start easy either. None of it starts easy. And that's the beautiful thing, is people want this badly and they work at it and they make it happen.
Yeah.
And that's the most encouraging thing for me about Bitcoin, is the sense that you could get us down in the moment. Like, we'll have lows, we'll have highs, but at the end of the day, it just keeps chugging along. And, it's more of a when, not if kind of situation. Like, in other
Right.
words, it's not going away. That's what's so beautiful about it being so lean, mean, robust, and just not giving a damn. Like, you can try to take a hit at Bitcoin, but it just keeps on chugging along. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
And I know this will sound weird to people that aren't super into it, but like it's the type of work or engagement that like feeds your soul sort of, because you're so aligned with what this is and you want it to succeed so much. It's not just like you're working at a job and you get paid 150K a year, you punch in, you punch out, and you have a nice house and a nice life and everything. Like, it's so much more meaningful than that. And this creates what some people might, hyperbolically call zealots, or just, passionate people that are engaged in the space. But another great example is BTC Pay Server, right? Like, these,
Oh,
they
what a
had a
beautiful example.
they had a community of people that were like pretty much not getting paid anything, or if like
Right.
some people weren't, and if they were, they're get like not enough to live on or anything like that. Like, all these people had to be sorting out their income in other ways, but they were
Yeah.
contributing to this project because they saw the potential of it. They knew how important it was. They loved the other people that they were working on it with. There
Right.
was such strong like ideological alignment around it, and then they end up building an awesome product. They, now obviously they're getting support from, different members of the community. They're getting financial support. And it's just, that's a beautiful thing to see. And like, Nate, tell me another industry where something like that happens.
It's incredible. And I think it's going to keep on spreading, specifically BTC Pay Server. Like, right now, off the top of my head, I would be really interested to see if some aspects of the BISC project and BTC Pay Server could interact. So say if I was a merchant
That'd be
and I
handy.
received a payment in Bitcoin, but let's say for some reason I had a need for fiat, it would be interesting if you could go from your non-custodial BTC Pay Server wallet, and then I guess there's nothing stopping you from putting something on BISC. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, or like something with Strike, when they like fully launch
Oh,
and stuff.
I love what Jack Mallers is doing and so forth. Like, what a really, I love that he's coming at it from like the mercantile exchange front, and he's talking about how quick it is for true final settlement. Like, it's interesting that we're getting Bitcoin's becoming more sophisticated in a sense. Like, it's connecting to larger markets, larger things. Yeah, he's doing great work.
Yeah, he's a fucking wonder kid, man.
Yeah,
I love that
absolutely.
guy. Yeah. Well, Mike, this has been a super fun chat, man. Do you want to any last words before we shut this thing down?
Anybody passing through New Jersey, if you ever want to go sailing, shout me out, Storm Jib on Twitter. I'll take you out on the Barnegat Bay. That's what I
Dude,
got.
that's a deal. When I'm in New Jersey, I'll definitely hit you up. I
The New
love to get
Jersey
on the
boat's
water.
nothing special. It's a you probably can't even see it. I'll take us to the water.
The tour. I think you gotta unmute yourself. You put your mute on. There you go.
I don't think you could see the sailboat over there.
No, it's pretty dark.
Oh well. There's a sailboat across the lagoon. It's a good one. It's just an old beater, but it's rigged well, and I go out in anything with it. It's a brick shit house. It's a Bristol 27 heavy displacement small cruising sailboat.
Nice.
Love it.
Also, before you go, for people out there, I mean, I know it's invite. Like, do you want to
I mean,
shout out the
if
Facebook group?
anybody's on Facebook and you want to check out Nurses Discussing Bitcoin, I let in people that aren't nurses. I mean, that's just a name, Nurses Discussing Bitcoin. I focus on nurses. But yeah, you just look it up on Facebook. The group is called Nurses Discussing Bitcoin. I welcome anybody to join. You want to share good quality Bitcoin content, you're welcome. It's just trying to hunt for normies.
Normie Hutton. Well, man, this was super fun, and good luck with everything. Hit me up anytime for another chat, or if you got questions. And on next time you're having one of those conversations, throw down the iPhone or your recording device and record it. And even if you don't want to publish it publicly, I'd love to hear it. So do it and fire it over.
I'll be glad to get you a recording. I'll have you one within the next couple weeks.
Oh, amazing! I can't wait, man.
All right. Check you
All right,
later.
take care,
Good
brother.
talking to you, John. Have a good day.